In 1968, Tom Prock and J. Howell arrived at Indianapolis Raceway Park with a car that looked familiar from a distance and almost impossible once anyone examined it closely. On top sat the unmistakable shade of a fiberglass 1933 Willis coupe, the kind of body that had become almost inseparable from upper-level gasser racing. Underneath, however, was something completely different, a purpose-built tubular chassis derived from contemporary funny car technology. Up front was a blown 427 cubic inch Chevrolet big block. The car was green, carried the name F-Troop after the television comedy about an inept cavalry unit, and burned gasoline because the class rules required gasoline. Prock and Howell believed they had built the next step in gasser development. The NHRA tech inspectors saw it another way. One look at the frame rails ended the weekend. The rules called for production-type automobile frame. F-Troop did not have one. Its body could resemble a 1933 Willis, and its fuel could be legal, but neither of those facts changed what was underneath. The car was rejected before it ever made a competitive pass at Indianapolis. For most racers, that kind of ruling would have forced a choice: rebuild the car around a legal production frame or abandon the project entirely. Prock and Howell chose neither. They stopped trying to fit the machine into the category that had rejected it. The Chevrolet engine came out. A Chrysler Hemi went in. Gasoline gave way to a mixture containing as much as 75% nitromethane. Then they took the car to independent tracks and began looking for opponents. That decision transformed F-Troop from a controversial gasser experiment into one of the most spectacular outlawed drag cars of the late 1960s. The same compact Willis that had been denied a place in sanctioned gas competition began running low 8-second quarter miles at more than 185 miles per hour. At the time, the quickest legal gassers in the country were running about 8.50 seconds on gasoline at their absolute best. F-Troop was operating on another level entirely. To understand why the car caused such a problem, it helps to understand what a gasser was supposed to be. The gas coupe and sedan categories had grown out of modified streetcar racing. The original formula was straightforward. Start with a real production automobile, retain a production-style frame and a recognizable body, then modify the combination as aggressively as the rulebook allowed while remaining on gasoline. Class placement was determined through a weight-to-engine displacement formula. The lighter the vehicle was in relation to cubic inches, the more favorable its competitive position could become. Within that system, the 1933 Willis 77 Coupe became almost ideal. It was tiny by American car standards, weighing roughly 2,000 pounds in stock form, and its short wheelbase and compact dimensions made it easy to turn into a brutally effective drag car. Ohio George Montgomery recognized the potential early and developed a competitive Willis gasser by 1959. Soon the shape was everywhere. Stone, Woods & Cook ran one. Big John Mazmanian ran one. Kes Pittman had one. By the middle of the 1960s, a serious attempt at the upper gasser classes very often involved either a 1933 or a 1941 Willis. The fuel requirement was just as fundamental as the chassis requirement. The G in gasser meant gasoline. Nitromethane belonged in top fuel dragsters and in separate fuel burning categories. NHRA had gone so far as to ban nitro from 1957 through 1964 because of safety concerns. When the fuel returned in 1964, it returned under carefully defined rules and in designated classes. Putting nitro in a gasser was not a clever interpretation of the regulations. It meant leaving the category altogether. At almost exactly the same time, another branch of drag racing was evolving at astonishing speed. The altered wheelbase factory experimentals that Chrysler and Ford had produced in 1964 and 1965 were becoming the machines that would be called funny cars. Early Dodge Coronets, Plymouths, and other factory-backed experiments moved axles forward to change weight transfer. Within only a few seasons, the concept had changed completely. By 1967, the modern funny car formula was emerging: a lightweight fiberglass flip-top shell, a purpose-built tube chassis, and a supercharged Hemi burning nitromethane. That was the engineering world J. Howell understood. And that is why F-Troop became so unusual. It combined the silhouette and cultural identity of an old-school gasser with the construction philosophy of a funny car. Howell had already spent years living at the edge of what drag cars could do. Born in Detroit in 1942, he lost both parents at around age 11 and was raised by his grandparents in Huntington Woods, a suburb just north of a city. At 16, he got his first car, and through his brother Jim, he found organized drag racing. It did not take long for people in Detroit to realize that Howell could build almost anything. By 1967, his resume was remarkable. He had helped build and had driven the original Little Red Wagon for Dick Branster Enterprises, the Dodge A100 pickup that became famous for enormous wheel stands. Howell was the man behind the wheel during some of its earliest violent demonstrations, including a Detroit dragway run that was reported at 147 miles per hour while the truck rode on its tailgate. He also built the mid-engine Dodge Charger funny car that recorded both low elapsed time and top speed of the 1965 U.S. Nationals in Indianapolis, 9.02 seconds at 164 miles per hour. His fabrication work reached the Ramchargers, Chrysler's factory-backed racing operation, along with cars such as Roger Lindermuth's Color Me Gone and Bill Flynn's Yankee Peddler. When someone in Detroit had a drag racing problem that required fabrication rather than theory, Howell was among the people they called. In 1967, while driving Pete Seaton's Corvair body funny car Detroit Dragway, Howell was credited with a 179 miles per hour track record and with becoming the first funny car driver to break through the 180 miles per hour barrier. By then, he was not simply a driver. He was one of the people helping define how the new category would be built. Soon afterward, Howell sold his own business, automotive engineering, and became general manager of the competition products division at the stamping operation run by Ron and Gene Lawdy. In drag racing fabrication, the Lawdy name carried enormous weight. Their chassis were among the most sought after in the country, and Howell suddenly had direct access to the kind of race car architecture shaping the future of the sport. Tom Prock reached that same moment from a different direction. Prock grew up around Woodward Avenue, Detroit's legendary cruising corridor, where he raced a 1939 Pontiac coupe against whoever appeared willing to line up. That world connected him with Howell and with fabricator Al Bergler, who would later handle the tin work on F-Troop. Detroit's hot rod community was competitive, but it was also remarkably interconnected. Builders, racers, machinists, painters, and tuners moved through the same shops and tracks, and ideas traveled quickly. What Prock did not fully understand as a young man was that racing already existed deep in his own family history. His father, Jimmy Prock Sr., had been an Indianapolis 500 riding mechanic, competing in 4 consecutive races from 1930 through 1933 alongside Chet Miller and finishing as high as 10th in 1931. Jimmy Sr. also raced midgets and suffered serious injuries in a crash before Tom was born. He died when Tom was about 14. The strange part was how little of that history Tom knew. His family largely kept the racing past from him. According to the account, he did not even know clearly what his father looked like until someone handed him a scrapbook at the funeral. Tom's entrance into motorsports, therefore, came through his own curiosity rather than through a father deliberately passing down the craft. That makes what followed across the next generations even more remarkable. By the late 1960s, Tom Prock already on a 1933 Willis that he campaigned in supercharged gas competition. One source credits him with gasser circuit titles in 1967 and 1968, although that timeline is not completely clear. What is certain is that Prock eventually brought the Willis project to J. Howell because he wanted something faster and more advanced. Howell's proposal was not really an improvement to the existing car. It was a rejection of the conventional gasser formula. Instead of reinforcing or modifying the Willis production ladder frame, Howell started with a Stage 1 Lawdy-style funny car, tubular chassis. The race-purpose structure was shortened and narrowed until it could fit beneath the dimensions of a 1933 Willis. A fiberglass reproduction of the coupe body was then built as a one-piece shell. Rather than opening doors and hood panels like a traditional production-based gasser, most of the body tilted forward to expose the chassis and drivetrain exactly as a funny car body did. The finished car used a 99-inch wheelbase, center steering, a full integrated roll cage, and only one functioning door. Al Bergler fabricated the tin work necessary to connect the unusual body to the chassis. The first version received green paint. A 427 Chevrolet big block sat at the front, topped by an 8-71 supercharger and Hillborn high-profile 4-valve fuel injection. Then came a name, F-Troop. From the outside, the car still triggered every visual association people had with a Willis gasser. Underneath, almost nothing about its construction belonged to that old formula. It was essentially a funny car chassis wearing a vintage gasser costume. That distinction explains the Indianapolis rejection more clearly than any mythology surrounding the event. There was no dramatic hearing, no prolonged argument, and no official ban letter. The car simply failed tech. Howell later remembered the episode in almost comically understated terms, saying the officials would not let it run because of something about the frame rails. Prock emphasized the flip-top body. In reality, both elements mattered. The chassis was not a production-type automobile frame, and the body was no longer conventional production coupe construction. F-Troop crossed several lines at once. The NHRA ruling was logical according to the rules that existed. If a purpose-built two-frame race car could enter the gasser category simply because someone placed a Willis-shaped body over it and filled the tank with gasoline, then the production-based identity of the class had effectively vanished. But there was an irony in the decision. The very sophistication that made F-Troop ineligible also demonstrated where serious drag racing engineering was heading. The most advanced car conceived for the gas classes was too advanced to be accepted by them. Prock and Howell did not immediately abandon the gasoline configuration. Through 1968, they ran the car locally with the 427 Chevrolet still installed. Eventually, however, the Willis was parked over the winter at the Logie operation. Howell remembered it as being stored upstairs, an extraordinary piece of hardware without a sanctioned category that wanted it. Then an opportunity arrived from the East Coast. Pete and Bill Hill, who campaigned their own 1933 Willis, approached Prock and Howell about forming a four-car traveling outlaw show. The idea had nothing to do with NHRA points or national event class structures. For teams would book independent tracks, race one another, and give spectators something they could not see at a conventional meet. The proposed group included the Hill brothers Willis, an Anglia associated with Jim Shore and his partner Hess, another Anglia from Chuck Finders, and F-Troop. The cars would be promoted as fuel coupes. Most important of all, nitromethane would be allowed. There would be no sanctioning body telling the teams what chassis architecture they could use or restricting them to gasoline. The scoreboard would decide whether the experiment worked. Prock and Howell accepted. Once that decision was made, F-Troop changed character completely. The 427 Chevrolet was removed, and in its place went a 426 cubic inch Chrysler Hemi from the same basic engine family dominating Top Fuel and funny car racing. The 8-71 supercharger remained part of the combination, as did Hillborn injection, but the fuel mixture now climbed to as much as 75% nitromethane. That percentage mattered. A blown Hemi on a heavy dose of nitro in that period could plausibly produce somewhere in the range of 1,500 to 2,000 horsepower, depending on tune and fuel concentration. F-Troop itself was never documented on a dynamometer, so no exact horsepower number exists. But comparable engines established the scale. The leading gasoline-burning, gas, supercharged combinations of the time were often operating in roughly the 500 to 700 horsepower range. In other words, the outlaw version of F-Troop may have returned from winter with 2 or 3 times the power of the gassers it had originally been built to race. And now, the chassis beneath, it was finally being used for the kind of power it had been designed to survive. The car's new paint made sure nobody mistook the transformation for a subtle one. The green body disappeared beneath a wild multicolor rainbow scheme that looked completely at home in 1969. Drag strips were already visually chaotic places. lettering, metal flake, candy paint, polished blowers, bright team shirts, and F Troop still managed to stand out. Its performance was even harder to ignore. J. Howell later described the car as a consistent 8.0-second zone machine capable of more than 185 miles per hour, even when he had to pedal it. In drag racing language, that meant the engine was producing more power than the track could reliably accept. Howell would lift off the throttle, let the rear tires recover, and then feed the power back in. F Troop was not struggling to reach the low eights. It was reaching them while the driver actively restrained it. The clearest documented example came at Dover Drag Strip in Delaware on August 17, 1969. According to source account, that was the same day Woodstock opened in Bethel, New York, a strange reminder of how many different versions of American culture were unfolding at once. At Dover, the four-car Outlaw package ran as fuel coupes, and F Troop produced the quickest pass of the group, 8.21 seconds at 180 miles per hour. The Hill brothers, Shore and Hess, and Chuck Finders were all part of the show, but none matched the Willis that day. The comparison with sanctioned gas racing makes the number even more dramatic. Ohio George Montgomery held the A/gas national record on gasoline at approximately 8.56 seconds and 171 miles per hour in a Mustang body car. F Troop was roughly half a second quicker and nearly 10 miles per hour faster, despite running outside the official championship structure. It was proof that the car rejected for being inappropriate to the gasser class had not been a failed idea. It had simply been an idea without a category. The Outlaw circuit gave it one. Howell remembered the tour as something close to a traveling circus. The four cars would book an independent strip, load everything into the trailers, drive through the night, unload, race, and then repeat the routine somewhere else. Howell was the only member of the group who also maintained a regular full-time job, which meant Monday morning frequently arrived after a weekend of nitro racing and overnight highway travel. The logistics were exhausting. The driving could be terrifying. A 1933 Willis body had never been designed for anything remotely approaching 185 miles per hour. Its upright windshield, high roofline, compact length, and slab-sided rear body had been shaped for ordinary road speeds in the early 1930s. Above roughly 165 miles per hour, Howell discovered that the body generated serious aerodynamic lift at the rear. He described runs in which the car would reach the timing lights partially sideways with one rear tire beginning to unload. Then the parachute would deploy, drag the car straight, and settle everything back down. Bill Simpson supplied the cross-form chute that repeatedly helped save the situation, but no one wanted to rely on a parachute as the primary device, keeping the back of a 180-plus mph car attached to the racetrack. The Loggy brothers approached the problem with a simple piece of practical engineering. They fabricated small, aerodynamic wings and mounted them on the rear fenders. The purpose was straightforward: use airflow to create downward force on the back of the Willis and counteract the lift that was making the car unstable. By later standards, the devices were crude. Within only a few seasons, funny car teams would become far more sophisticated about spoilers, wings, body rake, and high-speed stability. But on F Troop, the basic concept worked. When the car appeared on the East Coast with its new appendages, the other Outlaw teams laughed. The Hill brothers group thought the little wings looked ridiculous and began calling them Mickey Mouse ears. Howell did not argue. He made a pass. The first run with the wings produced 178 miles per hour, and the car stayed stable. The rear remained planted instead of trying to lift. By the following week, according to Howell, every car in the circuit had copied the idea and bolted similar wings onto its own rear fenders. That episode captured the way drag racing engineering often advanced in the 1960s. There was rarely a long theoretical debate. Someone fabricated an idea. Everyone laughed. The stopwatch settled the argument, and a successful part appeared on completing cars almost immediately. The four-car tour continued through 1969, moving among East Coast and Midwestern tracks. These were often smaller independent facilities or medium-sized strips that needed a headline attraction powerful enough to fill the grandstands. 4 nitro-burning coupes running in an 8-second range gave promoters exactly that. Match racing operated on a different economic logic from sanctioned championship competition. Fans bought tickets because they wanted to see particular cars and particular personalities race each other. The crowd generally did not care whether a national organization considered the chassis legal for a traditional category. If the cars were loud, fast, dangerous-looking, and recognizable, the promoter had a sellable show. That independent economy mattered because the traditional gas classes were approaching a crisis by the end of the decade. The leading gasser teams had to decide whether to keep developing cars inside increasingly restrictive production-based rules or move toward funny car racing, where greater speed and greater money were becoming available. Ohio George eventually shifted to a Mustang body under pressure from Ford. Big John Mazmanian moved into funny cars. Stone, Woods, and Cook built a Mustang flopper. The identities that had defined the gasser era were migrating elsewhere. F-Troop existed precisely in the gap between those worlds. Its body belonged to the visual language of the old gassers. Its chassis belonged to the future. It was too radical for the category it had been designed to enter, yet too old-fashioned in appearance to look like the fiberglass funny cars its construction resembled. So Prock and Howell simply stepped outside both systems. In hindsight, the car's Indianapolis rejection looks less like an isolated technical ruling and more like a marker on the timeline of the class itself. NHRA would eliminate the gas categories in 1972. 3 years before that, F-Troop was already demonstrating what happened when funny car engineering was combined with a gasser body and unrestricted fuel. The class could either accept that direction and cease to be what it had been, or reject it and eventually become obsolete. By the winter of 1969 and in 1970, Prock, Howell, and the Loggy brothers had reached their own conclusion. The future was funny cars. F-Troop had served as a bridge, and they had taken the bridge as far as they intended to go. The Willis was sold. Its nitro-burning Hemi drivetrain was moved into a new loggy chassis Mustang funny car called the Warhorse. Years later, Howell would describe selling F-Troop as a mistake, and it is easy to understand why. The car had been unique, instantly recognizable, and historically important before anyone involved had much reason to think of drag racing machines as artifacts worth preserving. But the new Mustang validated nearly everything the team had learned from the Willis. The source places one of the Warhorse team's major breakthroughs of the 1973 Summer Nationals at Detroit Dragway, where the field included Don Prudhomme, Tom McEwen, Gene Snow, and the Ram Chargers. Prock and Howell won all 3 days of the event. Drag News responded with the headline, "Howell all the way at Detroit," and the effort was described as finishing fourth in the NHRA National Funny Car standings for the season. For a team making the transition into full-scale funny car racing, that was a serious result. Howell's reputation also opened another door. Don Prudhomme wanted to concentrate on his top field program at the 1970 U.S. Nationals in Indianapolis and asked Howell to drive the Mattel Hot Wheels Barracuda funny car. Howell qualified fifth with a 6.99-second pass, placing him among the earliest drivers to enter the 6-second zone in funny car competition at a national event. That Indianapolis week produced another memory that had nothing to do with elapsed time. During a pre-race burnout, Tom Prock accidentally ignited the bleach box. The fire became spectacular enough that the team nearly found itself removed from the event. It was a sort of incident that could only make sense in the combustible world of early funny car racing. At the end of 1970, Howell stopped driving. Considering what he had already survived and accomplished, the decision was understandable. He had driven the early Little Red Wagon during its wheel stand years, built some of Chrysler's most important experimental race cars, run at the leading edge of funny car speed, and piloted F-Troop through high-speed instability that depended on parachutes and improvised wings to control. He continued working with the Ram Chargers for several more years, then took his family north. For 13 years, he operated a Goodyear Tire Center in Gaylord, Michigan. Eventually, he became a certified financial planner in Texas. He and his wife later spent years living aboard a sailboat and cruising between Maine and the Bahamas. It was a remarkable change of pace for someone whose earlier life had revolved around superchargers, nitromethane, fabrication jigs, and cars that regularly tried to become airborne. Tom Prock did not step away from racing nearly as soon. He continued driving funny cars for roughly another decade. One of his best-known periods came with the Utica Flash operation from New York State. Across approximately 6 years, the source credits him with winning more than 60% of his races. He reached the funny car final at the 1975 Gator Nationals and came close to winning the 1977 U.S. Nationals before red lighting against Don Prudhomme in the semifinals. The schedule could be relentless. Prock sometimes ran as many as 75 match races in a single year, a number that illustrates how important independent bookings remained even as NHRA national events grew in prestige. A competitive funny car could spend much of a season traveling from track to track, earning appearance money and racing in front of local crowds rather than living exclusively inside a national points championship. When Prock eventually stopped driving, he moved into the role that would shape the next chapter of his family's history: crew chief and engine tuner. He built cars for Tom McEwen's course Funny Car Corvette effort, won multiple NHRA national events, and was associated with an NHRA world title. By the late 1980s, he was working at Vinolia Pistons in Long Beach and later became the company's general manager. The skills developed during F Troop's Outlaw season did not disappear when the Willis was sold. They moved forward through Tom's career and then into the next generation. His son Jimmy Prock began helping the pits at age 11 in 1977. Jimmy did not learn nitro racing from textbooks. He grew up inside it, surrounded by engines that demanded constant tuning, tracks whose conditions changed hour by hour, and crews that had to make major decisions between rounds with limited data and no room for mistakes. That education eventually produced one of the most accomplished crew chiefs in NHRA history. Jimmy Prock tuned Joe Amato to championships and later worked at the highest level of funny car racing, including major success with Robert Height and John Force Racing. Cars under his direction became so aggressive and so recognizable in performance that people in the sport began using the nickname Prock Rocket. Then the family line continued again. Jimmy's son Austin Prock became a driver, while Austin's brother Thomas joined the tuning side of the operation. In 2024 and 2025, Austin won back-to-back NHRA Funny Car World Championships. Jimmy served as crew chief, with Thomas working as assistant crew chief. The symmetry became especially striking at the 2024 U.S. Nationals in Indianapolis. 56 years after F Troop had arrived at the same venue and been rejected in technical inspection before making a competitive run, Austin Prock won the funny car final. His grandfather Tom was there to witness a member of the family win at the track where the Willis experiment had once been told it did not belong. That is a 4-generation racing arc if Jimmy Prock Sr.'s Indianapolis career is included. From a riding mechanic in the 1930 Indianapolis 500 era, to Tom's Outlaw Willis and funny car years, to Jimmy's championship tuning career, to Austin's modern funny car titles. And as of early 2026, the story had not stopped moving. In late November 2025, Austin, Jimmy, and Thomas Prock departed John Force Racing together in one of the most significant recent personnel moves in NHRA. The family joined Tosca Racing, working with the Ford Mustang Dark Horse funny car program. The same family name that had been attached to an Outlaw 1933 Willis in 1969 was still operating at the front of professional funny car racing more than half a century later. F Troop itself did not enjoy such a clean continuation. After Prock and Howell sold the car, it passed through several owners. At some point it traveled to Hawaii and was raced there, although the surviving history does not clearly explain when it arrived, who first took it across the Pacific, or exactly how the transfer happened. By the time the Willis eventually returned to the mainland, almost everything that had made the 1969 Outlaw version visually distinctive had disappeared. The rainbow paint was gone. The body had been painted red. The chassis had been adapted into a comparatively ordinary bracket racing configuration. The foot-top Willis shell still sat over the tubular structure, but the machine no longer resembled the one that Howell remembered for the nitro circuit. When photographs of the altered car finally reached him, Howell said the sight made him sick. In his view, the Willis had been hacked apart. Its survival, therefore, became almost accidental. Dan Hicks of Lawrence, Kansas, encountered the car at a flea market in Wisconsin. Beneath the red paint and years of modification, he recognized what the chassis and body actually represented. He arranged to recover the car and begin bringing it back for its bracket racing condition. The full restoration was completed in 2006 by Stephen Timoshenko of Belleville, Michigan. The goal was not to return F-Troop to its original green, gasoline-burning Indianapolis configuration. Instead, the restoration recreated the version that had made the car famous on the 1969 Outlaw circuit. Rainbow paint, blown Chrysler Hemi, and a visual character of a nitromethane era. Before the project was completely finished, Howell was reunited with the car. At the 2005 Hot Rod reunion in Bowling Green, Kentucky, he was invited to drive F-Troop in the Cackle Fest parade. It had been approximately 35 years since he had last been in the machine. Howell described the experience simply as a very nice reunion, an understated reaction from a man whose memories of the Willis included 180 miles per hour runs, aerodynamic lift, and cross-form parachutes, saving the car at the far end of the track. Recognition followed the restoration. At the 2007 Detroit Autorama, the 55th annual show held at Cobo Center, the restored F-Troop received the Meguiar's Preservation Award from the Michigan Hot Rod Association, an honor presented to an outstanding preserved example of vintage hot rodding history. There was a certain irony in that award. The car that had once been rejected because its construction represented too much change eventually became valuable precisely because people wanted to preserve what it represented. Timoshenko later ran F-Troop at Norwalk Raceway Park on gasoline. On an easy pass, intended more to let people hear and see the car operate than to chase a record. It ran 9.88 seconds. Howell reportedly encouraged him to put nitromethane back in the tank and let the car behave more like its 1969 self. By then, however, F-Troop was no longer simply a race car. It had become a collectible object with a price attached to its historical identity. In 2008, it was offered for sale on eBay at roughly $425,000. The car's reputation also moved into the scale model world. ACME produced a limited 1/18 die-cast version in the rainbow paint scheme, with only 400 pieces in the run, along with a variant identified with the nitromethane configuration. At shows and auctions, the model has the same effect as the real car among people who know its history. The casual viewer may see his strange, colorful Willis, while the informed viewer immediately understands what the chassis under that shape meant. By the mid-2020s, the restored Willis was described as residing in a private collection, still wearing the rainbow colors that defined its outlaw period. It no longer needed to prove anything on a time slip. Simply hearing the blown engine cackle at a reunion or seeing the car appear at Indianapolis was enough to reconnect the present with the 1969 circuit that made it famous. That meaning remains the subject of an argument. Chad Reynolds of Bang Shift summarized the historical significance by describing F-Troop as the first gas-class car built on a shortened funny car chassis. It was quickly ruled illegal, but in his view, the episode may mark the beginning of the end of the Gasser class itself. The interpretation is persuasive because the technical ruling exposed a problem that rules alone could not solve. NHRA was trying to protect a category based on production-derived architecture at exactly the moment professional drag racing was discovering that purpose-built tube frames were safer, lighter, more adaptable, and capable of supporting far greater performance. F-Troop brought the future into tech inspection while wearing the body of the past. The officials rejected it. 3 years later, in 1972, NHRA eliminated the gas classes. That is not in the debate over what F-Troop should be called. Traditional gasser enthusiasts have a strong argument. A purpose-built tube chassis car burning nitromethane does not meet the fundamental definition of a gasser. The class was built around gasoline, production-style frames, and modified streetcar architecture. Once those elements disappear, calling the machine a gasser because it wears a Willis body can become historically misleading. From that perspective, the Outlaw F-Troop should be remembered as a funny car in gasser clothing, not as an equivalent of Ohio George Montgomery's legitimate A/gas supercharged machines. The opposing view is equally understandable. F-Troop came directly from gasser racing. Prock was a gasser racer. The project was conceived specifically for gas class competition. The Willis body was selected because of that tradition. Its rejection occurred because the builders tried to push the category beyond what the rules could absorb. And the consequences of that rejection became part of the story of how the category disappeared. So the car belongs to both histories precisely because it never fit cleanly into either one. It occupied the fault line between two eras. The old formula still supplied the shape, identity, and audience. The new formula supplied the chassis, power, and performance. F-Troop was not merely faster than a class that had inspired it. It was a physical demonstration that the old class had reached a technological limit. J. Howell lived long enough to see the car restored, its history reconsidered, and his own role received broader recognition. He received a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2018. Howell died on October 23, 2024, in Fenton, Michigan, at the age of 82. He had also been selected for the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame class of 2025, with the announcement coming not long before his death. His sons accepted the Hall of Fame honor in Gainesville in March 2025, with Jack Beckman presenting it. Howell had previously entered the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame in 2008. The honors arrived late, especially considering the resume. Howell had driven the Little Red Wagon during the period when its wheel stands became a sensation. He built the mid-engine Charger funny car. He fabricated cars connected to the Ram Chargers, Color Me Gone, and a Yankee Peddler. He helped create F-Troop, and he was credited with reaching the 180 miles per hour frontier in a funny car before anyone else. The Willis may be the clearest single object through which to understand the way he thought. He did not begin with the question, how do we make a legal gasser slightly better? He began with the question, what is the fastest and most effective race car we can fit under this body? That difference in thinking is what got the car rejected, and it is also what made it important. Seen from the beginning, the entire story is built around a contradiction. In 1968, F-Troop arrived at Indianapolis as an attempt to win within the gas classes. Its builders had obeyed the gasoline requirement, fitted a 427 Chevrolet, and wrapped the machine in the shape most closely associated with high-level gasser competition. Yet the structure beneath that body was too far removed from the production automobile the rules were written to preserve. The tech inspector rejected it without the car ever turning a wheel in competition. It should have been the end. Instead, the rejection freed Prock and Howell from the restrictions that had made the car impossible to classify. Once there was no reason to preserve its eligibility, they replaced the Chevrolet with a 426 Hemi, fed it up to 75% nitromethane, repainted the body in psychedelic rainbow colors, and joined a four-car outlaw tour, where the only meaningful question was how quickly the machine could reach the other end of the track. The result was a Willis capable of low 8-second runs and speeds beyond 185 miles per hour, while Howell was still pedaling the throttle. At Dover on August 17, 1969, it ran 8.21 at 180. It was quicker than the best legal gasoline gassers of the period. And when the body became unstable above roughly 165 miles per hour, the team did not slow the car down. They fabricated rear fender wings, endured jokes about Mickey Mouse ears, made a stable 178 miles per hour pass, and watched the other teams copy the idea almost immediately. That is why F-Troop matters beyond its elapsed times. It arrived at the exact moment when one form of drag racing was giving way to another. The Willis gasser had been one of the defining images of the early 1960s. By the end of the decade, purpose-built funny cars were taking over the fastest full-bodied racing. F-Troop combined those worlds so completely that the rulebook could not accept it. It looked backward and engineered forward. The old category disappeared in 1972. The people behind F Troop kept moving. Howell went from violet wheel stands in the Little Red Wagon and experimental Chrysler race cars to the Willis, the War Horse, a 6-second funny car pass at Indianapolis, and eventually a life far removed from the cockpit. Prock stayed in the sport, won as a driver, became a tuner and crew chief, and passed the accumulated knowledge of nitro racing to Jimmy. Jimmy turned that inheritance into a championship-level career of his own. Boston Prock then carried the family name into back-to-back NHRA Funny Car World Championships in 2024 and 2025, with Thomas working alongside Jimmy on the tuning side. At the 2024 U.S. Nationals, Austin won at Indianapolis, the same place where the Willis had failed tech 56 years earlier. Meanwhile, the original car followed a far less dignified route. It changed owners, traveled to Hawaii, became a red bracket racer, and was altered so heavily that Howell felt physically sick when he saw photographs. Then it was recognized at a Wisconsin flea market, recovered, and restored. By 2006, the Rainbow 1969 configuration existed again. Howell drove it at the 2005 Hot Rod Reunion before the restoration was fully complete. In 2007, the machine, once judged too radical to enter its intended class, received a preservation award at Detroit Autorama. That reversal almost feels too perfect. F Troop began life by violating the assumptions of category. Decades later, it became valuable because it preserved the exact moment those assumptions stopped working. Today, enthusiasts can still argue over the label. Was it truly a gasser? By the strict technical definition, the Outlaw Nitro version was not. Was it a funny car? Mechanically, much of the answer is yes, but its body, origins, audience, and historical purpose came directly from gasser culture. Trying to force it completely into either category misses the point. F Troop mattered because it was between them. It was built by gasser racers who borrowed funny car construction before the old class was ready to accept it. It was rejected for doing exactly that. Then, outside the sanction system, it demonstrated just how much performance the new architecture could unlock. Its story foreshadowed the disappearance of the class it had originally been created to conquer. And it did something else that no rulebook could have predicted. The knowledge gathered around that outlaw Willis became part of the family racing tradition that is still winning funny car races generations later. A 1930s Indianapolis riding mechanic. A son who discovered racing almost without knowing that history. A radical 1933 Willis built in Detroit. A grandson who became one of the sport's leading tuners. A great-grandson winning championships in modern funny cars. The line stretches nearly a century. Somewhere along that line sits F Troop, a tiny rainbow-colored coupe with a tube chassis, a blown Hemi, and a pair of wings that everybody laughed at until they worked. It was too advanced to be accepted as the gasser Tom Prock and J. Howell intended to build. It became too fast to be ignored as an outlaw. It was nearly lost, then restored. And more than half a century after Indianapolis turned it away, the family whose modern story grew from those pits came back to the same track and won. For a car that never managed to make its first sanctioned gasser pass, that is an extraordinary legacy.